Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. I thought I'd do a video today and speak about decatastrophizing. When tackling our OCD theme, I think it's so important that we can try and see our worst case scenario from a rational perspective, right? And this basically means bringing down the severity or the catastrophizing of a certain situation or theme and reducing our unhealthy emotional responses such as depression, anxiety and panic to healthier emotional responses such as regret and sorrow and sadness, right? Obviously, it's not to say that we won't see a certain situation as bad. That could be anything, such as falling ill, the loss of a loved one, being fired. These bad events in life are going to happen, but instead of responding with really strong irrational beliefs or awfulizing them, which leads to a lot of emotional suffering and ultimately gets us into trouble, we need to work at changing our perspectives on an event, which moves it from being awful to only bad. And when we move an event in our minds to only bad, it's a lot more manageable. We're just tapering down those extreme emotions. It's almost like putting in shock absorbers, right? Just tapering it down and having a lot more healthier negative emotions, which is easier to manage, and we're able to sort of function and get along with our lives in a lot more of an efficient way. So yeah, with this, it's not necessarily the event that we're trying to change. As I just said there's a lot of stuff that's out of our control. We're going to be susceptible to lots of difficult moments in our lives, whether we like it or not. It's not going to be plain sailing from the minute we're born to the minute we die. Basically, there's going to be loads of things that go wrong. Like losing loved ones, ill health, etc. So we need to just be prepared for that. We need to be prepared to not catastrophize, and we need to be prepared to have that rationality towards them. Also, we're not always going to get certain things on. Also, we're not always going to get certainty on things that we have or haven't done right. So, look at the coronavirus pandemic, for example. Many people unknowingly spread the virus, which ended up affecting other people. Obviously, this caused OCD to latch. And certain OCD themes as well, such as magic thinking and hit and run OCD. We're not going to get that certainty that we're at fault for something. So our perception on the worst case scenario has to change here. We have to have that rationality towards the worst case scenario, whilst also having that unconditional self-love and other acceptance. Obviously when you have those two frameworks in place, it helps us just tone down the worst case scenario and bring down those ruminations and compulsions, which obviously keep the OCD cycle fueled up. So yeah, catastrophizing was a really, really large part of my journey, actually. I'd spend a lot of time playing out worst case scenarios in my head, thinking about how bad things were, thinking about how bad my theme was, thinking about all like the baddest and the worst outcomes. I was spending lots of time just ruminating on those, making sure they didn't happen. And I had OCD, I had magic thinking OCD, which is one of the main themes for me, and I was absolutely petrified of being at fault for somebody's death. I was absolutely shit scared of that. For me, that was probably the most awful situation I could possibly find myself in. And it's commonplace among these harm related things, right? So magic thinking, harm OCD, hit and run. You'll find that a lot of people suffering from these, their main core fear or dreaded situation will be being at fault for somebody's death, and that'll be the worst thing, which is understandable, right? We've been sort of brought up in society to believe that doing wrong is obviously bad, etc. And yes, you're going to find that in the early stages of these themes especially, your beliefs are going to be very, very black and white, and there's going to be absolutely no way that you're not going to see being at fault for someone's death as 100% awful. That's going to be the worst case scenario for you, and it's just going to be no ifs, no buts, 100% awful. It's going to be impossible to see from your perspective that this can actually be changed. So yeah, as I just said there, being at fault for somebody's death, there's lots of fears that go into that. Jail, being a bad person, fear of never being able to live with yourself, beliefs on death, chronic guilt all thrown into the mix. And obviously as well, just on that, our definition of what the worst thing is, or the worst thing that can happen to us, is obviously going to be different from person to person. So you know, for example, being stuck for anxiety for the rest of your life, that might also be a really, really scary thing for you. That might be the 100% worst thing that you catastrophize. But you know, the same principles apply here. It's the perspective on the event that needs changing. So as I just said there, I spent a lot of time thinking about how bad it would be if I was at fault for somebody's death, and this video mainly is just to help those people, especially with those themes where they think they could be responsible, or they're just suffering so much through guilt and, you know, depression and really extreme emotions from this fact that they could be at fault for something. So let's just bring this down together, right? So yeah, as an example, my worst case scenario has been at fault for someone's death, and I thought, you know, becoming depressed, potentially not being able to live with myself would be the absolute worst thing. Obviously OCD wouldn't let me off the hook until I, you know, applied the unconditional self-acceptance. But then, for example, that I'm an infallible human, there's no universal law saying that I shouldn't be. But then also as well, which sometimes gets missed, you know, bringing down those extreme emotions and catastrophizing it. So we need to be able to look at such an event as being bad and not awful. But you know, why is such an event, aka being at fault for somebody's death or whatever, why is that only bad and not awful? Well, firstly, it's not great, right? I'm not saying that this event is good. We would not like this event to happen. It would be pretty bad, right? We'd be very sad about this. However, there is some universal law which excludes us from these things from happening. You know, we see these things happen all the time. However, it wouldn't be awful because, in actual fact, some good could actually come from it. Well, for example, when you die, right, it's likely that there is no good and there's no bad. There's no joy and there's no suffering. It's just nothingness. More than likely, that's how it is. I don't know this for a fact. I've not died before, but I'm just speaking rationally here. So, if it's just nothingness and there's no good and there's no bad, surely when we die, or we're at fault for something, or sorry, we're at fault for somebody else dying, surely that's sparing them from future suffering in life, which is always inevitable. You know, people get older, things go wrong with our health, we bear loss, and all those things. Life isn't a suffer-free zone, you know. From the moment we're born to the moment we die, it's full of suffering. So it's part of life. Also as well, if life is out of good, there will be no prevalence of like suicide or euthanasia, right? So if the worst thing, if your worst case scenario happened, okay, being at fault for somebody's death, then you could have actually spared this person a lot of future suffering, you know, because by definition, right, according to Albert Ellis, the worst fate for a human is eternal pain and suffering, never-ending pain that just goes on forever. And obviously with death, right, that actually falls short of that, because as I said just then, likely when you die, there's nothingness, right? So there's no pain. So that's something that you can take from it. Although we would not like that at all. I'm not saying we'd like that. I'd really, really not like to be at fault. But, you know, these things happen. They happen, you know. Also as well, say you went to jail as well, right? To add insult to injury. That wouldn't be ideal, right? And you'd probably miss out on some areas of life, like travel, relationships, etc. You might get into trouble with other prisoners. However, you could still eat, you could still exercise, you could read books, and so on. You still have some areas for happiness in your life, although it'd be more limited. You could have a roof over your head. Some people commit crimes to actually be in jail, to be off the streets, so some people don't find it that bad. It's all down to perspective, you know. It takes a while to see. I was sat at a football match today, right? West Ham against Everton. Everton scored a goal, and myself and all the other West Ham fans was all sat there just absolutely dismayed, really not happy. And there's one small pocket of fans in the stadium who are absolutely cheering their heads off from that same event. So from that same event, it can't be that the event has caused you your disturbance, because that same event is causing two different reactions. So as just an example, that is just the way in which we can see that our perspectives are the thing that are fueling it, you know. And luckily enough, our perspectives are malleable. Our brains change. We can rewire our brains through our beliefs, which obviously takes a lot of time. So let's have a look at another example. Say you're really, really catastrophizing, being stuck with anxiety for the rest of your life, right? Wouldn't it be ideal? You know, it would suck. You'd probably be a bit tired a lot of the time. You'd have a lot of physical symptoms in your stomach, maybe in your head, maybe heart palpitations, and maybe you just probably wouldn't be as happy as what you could be, right? However, if this happened, you can probably still find some moments of happiness in your life. For example, even in the depths of suffering, I remember I was still able to enjoy my favourite food. I was still able to exercise. I was still able to see my friends. I was still able to do like these certain things, right? So although these moments may be brief, you can still have some sort of happiness. And also the chances are, if you work on your recovery, you're going to be able to enjoy more of these moments. Someone laying in a hospital bed on their last legs would beg to be in your position, where you have the use of your legs, the freedom to go where you want with your time, right? So, you know, you find that even in the worst situation you can imagine, it could always be worse, right? And some goodness, even if it is quite limited, could come from it. You know, you look at Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning. He managed to appreciate things such as a piece of bread and companionship under the worst human conditions. You know, suffering in a concentration camp in Auschwitz for a few years, that's as bad could get, and he still managed to have those perspectives. So, you know, if he can do it, then if he can change his perspectives in that manner, in those conditions, then anybody can, right? So, you know, when we're saying that something is entirely awful, right, you're saying that it's maximum level of badness. You're saying that there's nothing can be worse, nothing can be surpassed. There's no avenues for happiness. No good can come from the event. But you'll find that that's impossible, right? As I've just said there, even in the worst events, some good can still come from it. So if some good can still come from it, right, that means it's basically impossible to say that something is awful. So if it's impossible to say that something is entirely 100% awful, then obviously that doesn't really fit the definition of awful. It makes more sense to only call something bad, right? So this is a really good way and healthy way to look at such supposedly awful things, and rather they're only actually probably bad. And obviously when they move down to bad rather than awful, they're actually a lot more manageable. So yeah, when you obviously look at stuff that's only bad, you can just handle these negative emotions in a much more healthy way. You know, it's those really strong extreme emotions like guilt and depression that really get us into trouble and really impair our functioning. But you know, when you're able to bring that down by just, you know, taking the good in a certain situation and just looking at those, and, you know, really working away at the beliefs, not compulsively, but, you know, just chipping away bit by bit, reading the books, not just once, but, you know, twice, 3 times, you can start to really change your perspectives and get really deep. And you're able to see that, you know, in most situations in life, there's actually some good that can come from it. So therefore, most of the time, it's impossible to say it's awful, right? So yeah, just keep working at your beliefs. It definitely is really worth doing. In those early days, it's going to be absolutely impossible to see that something isn't awful. You know, I really do remember really struggling to see how something can be awful, especially with my core fears. But you really can just really can just look at situations for what they are, and you are able to look at some good things from situations and see that actually, you know what, they might not be as bad as what they could be at first sight. And with that in mind, you can just help taper down those extreme emotions. You can decatastrophize, and you're able to manage symptoms a lot better. And trust me, this will really help you in your recovery journey. So for anyone out there who's really struggling with catastrophizing, I hope this video is helpful. And yeah, if you've got any comments or suggestions, just comment down below. Thanks guys, I'll see you in the next video.